Good morning, everyone. We are back here on theCUBE for day 2 of our live coverage of the Snowflake Summit 2025 here at the Moscone Center in San Francisco. I'm your host, Rebecca Knight, alongside my co-host and analyst, Dave Vellante. We are both back, fresh from the builder keynote this morning. What'd you think?
It was different.
Yeah.
I think they did a really good job of laying out what their strategy is around app dev, which is different from the traditional enterprise SaaS world. That's not what Snowflake's trying to do. They're trying to come up with novel, AI-powered agentic apps that, aren't necessarily powering the enterprise, but might be powering sort of new modes of how we work.
Well, we're going to be talking about that this morning, all day, in fact. But I would also like to welcome our guest to the show, a good friend of theCUBE, I should say, Sanjeev Mohan. Thank you so much for returning here to share your insights on what had happened today, yesterday, and even the day before on Analyst Day. So
Sanjmo is back.
He is back for more.
Thank you so much. This is like second home for
me.
So.
Well, we
Thank you.
Welcome. Why don't we talk about some of the acquisitions that are really in the spotlight right now? Let's start with Crunchy. What's your hot take, Sanjeev?
So very interesting because it's yet another open source Postgres that has been acquired. The question is which one is next? And so there's a long list, and there are other, like a lot of Postgres vendors are looking to get acquired because 3 weeks ago now, Databricks acquired Neon. And now Snowflake has acquired Crunchy, very different databases. People think, oh yeah, they're both Postgres, but they cannot be poles apart. Because Neon is meant for very different use cases, which are very ephemeral, and agents will bring up a database and shut it down. But Crunchy is a super hardened. It is a DoD-hardened database that they built their own Kubernetes operator, for instance. They have no longer just an OLTP, they have an OLAP, so they have analytical, which is interesting because that analytical piece actually overlaps with Snowflake. So Snowflake has to make a decision now on what part of Crunchy they're going to adopt, which is transactional, and what to do with the analytical side.
Well, you would think they're going to kill the OLAP piece of it, or maybe spin it out or whatever. But but the other question is this? First of all, they claim that this was not a response to Databricks. That Databricks actually responded to them because they knew this was in the works.
Yes.
We love the back and forth between those two companies. But the other question is this essentially a replacement for Unistore, which was announced in I think 2022, to great excitement around transactions. Could never really ship it. Finally, I guess, are shipping it.
Correct.
It's evidently exceeding expectations, but I would suspect expectations were pretty low. Is Crunchy essentially a replacement for Unistore? And then the other questions are, is it going to be another SKU? Is it going to be integrated into the Snowflake data platform? Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I've asked these questions, and my understanding is it will be integrated. Crunchy will run inside Snowflake security parameters, a perimeter.
Sure, okay.
And the whole, because you still have to go from operational to analytical, so it doesn't magically show up. These are two different products, but they're going to hide that whole data movement and make it look like one. So single pane of glass, you can now write a query once it's integrated where you can join analytical data with operational data.
Different use case, but it sounds a little bit like MySQL HeatWave.
Yes.
You know what I mean? You got transactions over here, and
Correct.
you got analytic over here. You've got a single, pane of glass.
Right.
You've got very high speed connections between the two.
Correct.
And some magic in between.
Right.
Okay, and that's fine. It solves the problem, but I guess the other question I would have, and I don't want to go too rat holey on Crunchy, but will Snowflake be in a position to actually affect and execute transactions within, right to, whether it's CRM, ERP, HR systems? They're a step away from that because they don't have the process knowledge. Those are still going to have to be the domain of the application.
Yeah.
So where does that put transactions?
So Dave, I don't see Snowflake playing in that space at all. Not yet. Maybe in the future, but I don't see it. I see Snowflake as the engine. And all the CRM, all the order management, manufacturing, all of that will continue. Those may get transformed from being monolithic ERP into agents, but different vendors. Snowflake is an engine. So Snowflake can now say, if you want to consolidate, then just use us for transactional and analytical. It's not always a success story. I mean, you've been following SAP for a long time. I mean, how long SAP tried with Sybase and HANA and, right? So
not easy.
It's not easy.
Yeah. Well, this is why Tony Baer and I were talking last night, and he was saying that he felt like Salesforce, instead of buying Informatica, should buy a database company. And I said, no, Salesforce, they don't want to be the data platform. They look at data platform as infrastructure. They're happy to cede that to Snowflake and Databricks and others. They want to be the agent layer on top of that. But
correct. And actually now I would say, why would Salesforce want to buy a database company? Because there's a little bit of standardization happening at the storage level thanks to Iceberg.
Yeah.
Iceberg.
Exactly. Exactly. So why own the data? They got a good database. They got Oracle.
Correct.
Use
yes.
that.
So the only place, so there's a lot of standardizations going on at agent level. There is standardization, communication with MCP and A2A. The only place there's no standardization is metadata.
Yeah.
There is no metadata standard.
Well, isn't Zhamak trying to solve that problem?
We talked about it. It's a different problem. She's more on the data products.
Yeah, of course.
But the metadata standard, like we need a TCP IP for metadata basically. And there are open standards. There's something called open metadata. It's been around for 4 years. I don't think has gone anywhere. Open lineage. And in fact, Snowflake is supporting open lineage.
Yeah,
so
well, and that's trickles in, does it not, to Unity and Polaris, which are the governance catalogs. But let's get into some of the announcements, Rebecca.
Well, there were many, but actually, even before we do, I want to ask Sanjeev about his take about yesterday and some of the announcements we heard on the stage yesterday, and what your take is about what's going on at the platform level. We heard about adaptive computing. Of course, Marriott was on stage, in fact, announced this new product. And then also Warehouse 2.0. Want to get started with Warehouse?
Okay, let's start with Warehouse. What's happening is super exciting with this thing called Gen 2 Warehouse. And in Gen 2, the idea is that actually, even with adaptive, it's no longer t-shirt size, so it's elastic, totally elastic scaling now, which means that as a user, I am going to request, I want to store X amount of data, or I want to do an ETL compute or something like that, and Snowflake can then provision the resources for me. As my needs grow, they can incrementally scale it up. Today what happens is that I have to choose a t-shirt size, and I have no idea what's my right t-shirt size.
Gain weight, you might lose it, right.
Yeah. and let's say my t-shirt size gives me, let's say 8 vCPUs. And now I have a need for a little bit more compute. So where do I go? I go to the next t-shirt size, so I get 8 more CPUs, but I only wanted 1. So now I've got an over-provisioned cluster. So this is what Snowflake is doing is truly cloud, what cloud was built for. Oracle's been saying this for a long time.
For years now. It's interesting, Sanjeev, because the problem that Snowflake, one of them that they originally solved, was the separation of compute and storage. And customers used to complain, I need more storage. I don't need to buy another compute cluster, but you were forced to do that. Snowflake and BigQuery solved that problem. But it created a new problem, which was t-shirt sizes. Right. So they solved that. They created a new bottleneck, and now they're attacking that bottleneck, which is a good thing. And I think they would argue that while Oracle, it's true, is doing it in its own little world, from the standpoint of modern data stack, modern data platforms, they are really the first to do that.
Correct. So now talk about Gen 2. With Gen 2, Snowflake is promising performance boost of 2 to 4 times. But so that's what you see in the press, but if you peel the onion, you find out that the cost of Gen 2 cluster is 1.3 times the cost of original. So it's going to cost customers more, but because they're going to run the jobs faster, so overall it'll even out.
But you got to get 30% better performance, 1.3 times performance
Correct.
to break even.
Right.
Which
So,
I would think they're going to be able to
right.
achieve.
So then the question comes, oh, then what's the benefit for the customer? Because your TCO is not going to come down. So the point, what Snowflake...
Sure it will. Why wouldn't it? If you get 2x performance,
If you get 2x,
yeah,
yes.
if you get 1.8x, your TCO
Yes,
should
so-
come down over time.
So Snowflake is being very careful.
Yeah.
They don't want to promise that your TCO will come down. But what they're saying is that because your job finished in half the time, so you are 50% more productive to do other things. And that's the storyline.
That's the economic benefit
Yes,
there. Okay,
correct.
so from what you're hearing, are customers buying that? I mean, is that compelling enough
Yeah.
for them?
I've already met some customers who are already using Gen 2, because Gen 2 warehouse, all of a sudden we are all talking about it, it's been out for 4 weeks. So it's not new. And so they're already customers using it.
But the reason why this is so important is, and we've talked about this, is the point of control is moving in this open world from the database to the governance catalog.
Yes.
And as we've said, the values even move further up. But what that means, and really Iceberg and Databricks really force this, is that the best engine is going to win. So Snowflake has to have the absolute best engine to win that.
Right.
So that's why 2.0 is so important, at least in my view. Do you buy that?
Yeah, I completely. I think this 2.0 is how it should have been right from the beginning.
2.0 is what 1.0 should have been?
Yes, yes, I think so. And actually I have a pet peeve about Iceberg, which is it's consuming a ton of my time every day. On LinkedIn, there are all kinds of article nuances of Iceberg, deletion vectors are missing, and streaming is not good, or compaction, and why in the world are we wasting our time on Iceberg? Iceberg should be invisible. We should never have to think about it. But we are spending inordinate amount of time on Iceberg.
You know what's funny about that, Sanjeev? In my many decades of doing research, I would say that the outcome always trumped the fear of lock-in, with the exception of about 15 to 20% of the customers.
Yeah.
So you would think the majority of the customers, and that's probably what's actually happening in the marketplace, is they're getting on with their day, they're doing whatever they're doing inside of Snowflake, using Horizon, and okay, maybe there's a portion of the estate that's moving, and I'm sure it is, to Iceberg tables, and so they're forcing Snowflake to manage those tables in the same spirit.
Right.
But I agree with you. I feel like we're over-rotating on this.
Completely. We should be spending our time not on Polarises of the world. We should be spending our time on Horizons of the world.
Yeah.
Because the difference is that Polaris is a technical metadata store. And Horizon is where the business knowledge is being captured. So the business semantics, the knowledge graph, that is what will fix AI.
Although because of Iceberg, portions, more of that Horizon, role-based access control function is trickling out to the open source world. And again, this is an interesting dynamic that's being forced by Iceberg and open table formats and the competition.
Right. So next week we are back here for Databricks Summit, and you'll hear more about RBAC, ABAC, attribute-based access control, because that's the next horizon. The role-based access control is done. That's the basic. But how do you capture the business semantics? Like, for example, if I'm a business user, I want to say I want my invoices to be secure. What's an invoice? Invoice is a concept that's made up of a number of tables.
So, but also, I mean, they are making progress in terms of not only being able to read, but also write, being able to update other governance platforms.
Yes, correct.
So there, as we know, there's catalogs of catalogs, and so Snowflake's doing the hard work there, which is necessary. I mean, they have to do it. That's what customers want. That's what the market's demanding.
Right.
Okay, so Other announcement. I mean, there's so many announcements. I feel like a little bit. It was like a little mini reInvent with all the announcements, trying to keep up. I mean, the stack of announcements that I have here is, it's pretty significant.
Well, we mentioned adaptive compute, and I want to hear Sanjeev's take on that, because we had Christian Kleinerman, of course, who's the head of product with a Marriott executive, talking about how their teams were really working together and collaborating on this project for easier management, better utilization, and faster performance.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you think it will deliver.
I 100% believe in it. When I talk to customers, you see there's a spate of consolidation going on. Why is it happening all of a sudden? Because we are coming out of this ZERP-infused modern data stack, where we had massive choices. Every specialized super micro segment of the landscape or the pipeline had 20 different players. So customers are saying, we are not interested. And we just talked about there's no common metadata standard, so which means that you're constantly integrating and there's so much of overhead. So the whole idea, why I think this will be successful, is because customers are saying we want minimal overhead, what AWS would call undifferentiated heavy lifting. Why we pay our IT folks to help deliver business goals, not to tune the database and tune the cluster and size it. So Marriott wants their IT people to go experiment with the newest LLM and see how it can work, not spend time saying, what is the t-shirt size for this job?
Or drowning in tickets from, yes, exactly, exactly.
How about OpenFlow? Let's talk about that.
Yes.
What's your take on it? How's it compare to sort of alternatives?
Right. So Data Volo team, Joe Witz and Luke Roque, they were at Cloudera. And Joe Witz actually invented Apache NiFi when he was part of the US defense, the government stuff. So NiFi was kind of buried in this slew of so many different standards. What Snowflake is doing is they're taking the best of Data Volo, which they acquired, and Snowpipe streaming, and they're putting it all together into OpenFlow. So now the question begs that what happens to Fivetran's of the world?
Well, they would say that Fivetran's really good for simple use cases.
That's what they told us. Yes.
We deal with all the complex stuff, which I'm sure Fivetran would say, well, wait a minute.
I know. and then they also hinted that in Fivetran you have to temporarily land your data in the internet and then you bring it over. We have no such thing. You go from the source to the target. For most complex use cases, I'm not buying it. The product just got announced. So how can it be better than something that's been around?
I think Fivetran has a very capable high-speed data mover and has dealt with some of these challenges. I don't know, it feels really kind of AWS-y to me. Well, the customers are asking for it, so we're doing it.
And Dave, what I found interesting was the name OpenFlow. Last year, we were here for Databricks Summit, and they bought Arceon, and they launched Lakeflow. So now you've got Lakeflow and OpenFlow. So
the naming conventions are interesting. All right, so that's cool. How about Cortex? What do you see in the innovations on Cortex, which is kind of the AI agent layer? Seems to be doing well in the marketplace. I mean, it's getting adoption, according to Eric Bradley in the ETR research.
What I liked, some demos we were shown where, you know who is the biggest customer of Snowflake? Rebecca?
Tell me.
I know.
He knows. The biggest customer of Snowflake is Snowflake.
Of course, yes.
And so Snowflake has 8,000 people using Cortex AI. And actually, I think we were told 30% adoption so far. So what Snowflake has done is they are eating their own dog food or drinking their own champagne.
Let's go with dog food. It's not always good.
So what they're doing is they are building these assistants for their salespeople, for support people, and they're seeing quite a dramatic turnaround in the amount of time it takes to close a support ticket, for instance. So this is all being built on Cortex. So I was very impressed to see these are all working products, production. that are in use.
And of course, we're out of time, but just a comment. So Snow Convert, which is all about bringing stuff into, a lot of migration stuff, they have to do that to simplify migration, because it really needs to be inside of Snowflake to capture the value. So Snow Convert, and then a bunch of AI stuff, Snowflake Intelligence, which is a natural language interface that you can query through. That's very, I think it's table stakes, but to get it to work, and all the text to SQL stuff. They also have a data science agent, which is super important because they were getting killed, frankly, in the data engineering, data science space, and now that's a workload that they can go after very aggressively. A bunch of stuff on apps and collaboration, some of which we heard today.
Marketplace, internal marketplace, external marketplace, this is quite a bit.
The stuff they're doing with the publications like Gannett.
Yes, exactly, USA Today. Yeah.
Where they're basically helping them monetize.
Right.
Interesting, small today, we'll see
what
kind of impact it has.
So I know we are out of time, we haven't talked about native apps, that's a huge topic.
And it has been for a couple of years, but yeah,
it has.
And it's evolving.
Right, so if you remember, I asked this question that there's a bit of a pushback on native apps, so if I may take a second. So the way native apps work is they have to work in a very strict parameter. And it says you must use these APIs, and like if you are going to open, let's say, ports, network ports, then it defeats the purpose. Because,
it's App Store.
Yeah.
It's right, it's iPhone.
Correct, yes, so this is where some vendors are like, it's too restrictive for us. For example, to run in as a native app, it's containerized. So where is it running? It's running on SPCS, Snowpark Container Service, which is built on Kubernetes. But it's not...
But you can't take advantage of...
It's not pure Kubernetes. It is using their own primitives. So that's why... But native apps are still growing healthy, and it's...
I mean, it's a good point. Kubernetes is all about write once, run anywhere.
Correct.
And you're saying you can't necessarily run anywhere. Yeah,
yes.
so that's interesting. But it's still clever that they are using the best of Kubernetes within their own estate.
Correct.
So, to be continued.
Yes.
To be continued, indeed. We have a great lineup of guests. We have lots of Snowflake executives, of course, as well as customers, Rakuten, Whoop, Komodo Health. So I look forward to getting into more of that with you today. Thank you so much, Sanjeev Mohan. A pleasure as always.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sanjeev.
I'm Rebecca Knight for Dave Vellante. Stay tuned for more of theCUBE's live coverage of Snowflake Summit. You're watching theCUBE, the leader in enterprise tech news and analysis.